So last time that we were here, we used our place adapter to make a much more fully featured list view. There's one problem with our methodology though, which is on a device, or a slower device, or with tons of content, this is not going to be fairly smooth. It's going to be rough. You can see it a little bit in the emulator here, but on a real device you'll notice as you fling it up and down that it's going to stutter. And a lot of people have wondered, well, why does this happen? And the reason why it happens a lot on Android devices and Android applications is because a lot of people aren't implementing the right architecture to actually do this as efficiently as possible. So we're going to change that right now. The first issue with the particular list that's going on right now is I've instantiated this object, this object, this object, this object, and this object. And when I scroll up here, that object's still there. In fact, I keep initializing new objects every time getView is called as I scroll down this list. Is there a way around that? There actually is, and it's a very clever pattern, often referred to as the holder pattern. What the holder pattern says is, I'm going to take this art house view, and when it scrolls up here, and it's behind this My Places block here, right? I'm actually going to change art house to Taylor's Taylor. I'm going to change 78701 to 60610, and I'm going to take this particular picture and replace it with this one. And then what I can do is, as this scrolls up, I can have this row down here just be about setting these particular items to their new values instead of having to create a whole nother row with all of the things that go into it. This row has a lot of things it's extending from, and the more that we can recycle or reuse our views, the more efficient it will be. So, our list view activity hasn't changed from the last video that you saw. We're still getting a list view. We're getting a place adapter and passing it our row. We're still using a places array that has all these place objects. So there really is nothing that has changed in the activity in terms of doing it inefficiently versus doing it efficiently. As you can see here, our place code is also just the same. I haven't changed it at all. What we have changed, though, drastically, is our place adapter. Our place adapter has the same beginning where we have a constructor that saves the context, the row, and the data for later use. But the getView looks very different. There's a lot more going on. On top of that, there's a whole other private static class in here. Well, let's go through the getView method and see how this actually works. Okay, so we have a rename of the convert view, again, just for clarity. We're creating a placeholder object. Now, what is that? The placeholder object is this guy right here, and all it is a small little class that holds a reference to 1, 2, 3 views, the same number of views in our row. So it's not itself a view, it's much smaller, it's just a holder for 3 different references. Okay, well, I have a row, then I have this holder, and the first thing that's going to happen is if our row equals null, well, why would it ever be anything other than null? Well, the getView method gives us a little bit of a interesting mechanic in the sense that this convert view is actually old views that we may not need anymore. They get passed in so that we can reuse them. So if we don't have any view that we've ever created yet, in the case that this convert view will be null, we're going to have to start creating it. So when it first starts up, right, art house doesn't exist as a view, so we're going to have to create it. And it's the same thing as before. We get an inflator using our handy context. We inflate it and set that row reference to be equal to our actual row XML that we had down here. After that, though, we're creating another placeholder. So what is that about? Well, the placeholder is, again, that class where it's just a reference to a text view, another text view, and an image view. And we're just going to point them to the ones on that particular row that we just created. We're going to do one more thing, and this is where the magic happens. Set tag. So this view and all views have a set tag method, and they also have a get tag method. And as you can see, the actual type for those is just object. Well, get tag and set tag basically allow us to set any reference that we want and just kind of save it on the row. In this particular case, we're going to be setting a reference to this holder class. Let's skip the else for a minute and just see what normally happens after here. We have, okay, we're getting the place from the data array. After that, we're going to skip over here to the view section here. And we're doing the same thing that we did before, except for rather than setting the view to reflect the data we need to display on the row, we're doing it on the holder. As we exit this particular section of code, we'll see that we're doing something very similar to what we were doing before, where we get the place object out of the data array. But rather than now dealing with the row that we had before, we're dealing with this holder object. Well, that's kind of confusing. Don't we actually want to change the particular values on the row, not this new weird holder class? Well, that's what the holder pattern is actually all about. This holder has an image view, a name view, a zip view, and those are just references to our row, name view, zip code, and image view. So it's almost like it's pointing to the row through the holder. Now, why would we want to do that? Well, that's because if we do it this way, then rather than having to deal with the row itself, we can actually just reuse the views as they come off of the particular queue or stack. So let's say we came in with a different idea. Let's say our get view is being called, and we do have a row that is ready to be reused and recycled. What happens? Well, for one, our row is not going to be equal to null. So what happens? Well, we're going to hit our else. Our holder is going to be equal to row.getTag. Okay, well, what object is that going to be? Well, it's going to be the holder for the one before. So using that, we come out of the else statement, and rather than having to create anything or inflate anything, all of this particular code has been optimized away. We're just pointing to a reference of something that we've already instantiated and can reuse. Now, that gives us the flexibility to have a really fast, liquidy, smooth text view like the pros. But let's say we want to do some other stuff, like maybe we don't want to just have our view be something where we click on the whole row. Maybe we want to be able to click on just this item image here. Or maybe we have a switch, as you've seen for alarm clocks and stuff like that. Well, we're going to use that same methodology of reuse and recycle to make a single listener, just one pop-up listener that has an on-click. And we're going to use that same listener for every single row, right? Because we don't know how many rows we could have. We could have thousands of rows if we just keep infinitely scrolling. We don't want to be allocating a listener for each one, especially when they all do the same exact thing. So our on-click method here gets passed in a view. The problem is that if that's all we have, at this particular scope point, there's no way for us to actually understand our position to make a real reference to which item we are in our data array or on the screen. Well, that's where we can use get and set tag to save the actual position along inside the view that we want to have it react to. So let's go up here to this code where we're actually setting that. You can see we're having that holder image view. We're setting a listener on it. It's pop-up listener, which is the same one that we have here. Again, just one is being instantiated. We're taking the position that we have here, and again in 0, 1, 2, 3, etc., and we're actually saving it as an integer object. We're using the setTag method to store this position on the image view itself. Not the holder, but the image view. So the image view, its tag is now equal to what its actual position was. And using that, on our onClick listener down here, we can now get that particular integer out using getTag. We don't even need to know what that view actually was. And we can make a reference to the particular position using that, getOutOfPlace object, and now act on it in whatever way we see fit. So you can use this get and set tag trick in order to store any reference you want in a view, and it's really handy for things like list views or infinite scrolling views. So you can't necessarily tell right here if it's that much smoother because my computer is pretty fast. But on a device that was older, you'd definitely be able to tell. And you also can see that now when we click on any of these pieces, the image view reacts individually to those place objects. And now, using this holder pattern, you're going to be able to make list views following the same pattern no matter how complex your row is, like a pro.